If you are one of those people who thinks the government is hiding countless secrets from you and constantly covering things up, then you would be absolutely right. I am one of the people they hired to clean up their mistakes. I am not entirely sure why they chose me. There was not much special about me, but perhaps that was exactly why they did. I was always a loner. I was never going to cure cancer or create the next weapon of mass destruction, so I was easily disposable.
They approached me one day after I finished working my shift at a fast food restaurant. I am not sure I had much of a choice, but my life was so dull that I was ready for any kind of change. The men who came to my door did not even tell me what I would be doing. They simply said that if I wanted to aid my country, I should follow them. I did not look back once. As strange as my life has become, I still do not regret it. The next year of my life was grueling. I was put through extreme physical and mental training. I learned about things I had thought existed only in movies. I am not sure what would have happened to me if I had failed training, but I cannot imagine they would have simply let me return to my normal life. Not once did they mention what I was training for during that year. They waited until I graduated. After I received the seal of approval from the higher-ups, I was brought into a small room filled with people in black suits. Finally, I was informed what I would be doing. My new job would be hunting down failed experiments and other oddities that the government had failed to contain. Not every assignment would be the same. Some would be relatively easy, while others would be almost impossible. Most missions came with the option of bringing the target back dead or alive, although it was always preferable to bring them back alive for further experimentation. My first assignment was an easy one. Its code name was the Ice Cream Man. The Ice Cream Man, like most veiled experiments, had once been human. He still had the appearance of one. He looked like a typical ice cream truck driver, but he was essentially a robot, concerned only with doing his job. So, what was special about the Ice Cream Man? I was never told why the creatures I hunted had been created, but I always formed my own theories. The Ice Cream Man's truck was the truly special part. The music coming from its horns worked almost like a human magnet. It entranced anyone within hearing distance and compelled them to approach the truck. Once you approached the truck, you bought ice cream. I had heard that the ice cream tasted delicious, but of course, I would never know for sure. Anyone who ate it entered a fugue state. For the next 12 hours, the person would carry on with their day as usual. The following day, however, they would remember nothing. I am sure you can see why that would be a valuable asset to the government. Unfortunately, the scientists assigned to test the Ice Cream Man underestimated him. Before they knew it, they had woken up 12 hours later, wondering where their test subject had gone. I am sure I was given this simple assignment as a sort of test.
I was given a pair of enhanced noise-blocking earplugs and sent to the ice cream man's last known location. He was not difficult to find. I simply followed the mass of vehicles lined up to receive their sweet treat. I allowed him to serve everyone in the area. It would make my job easier if no one remembered what had happened. After everyone had received their ice cream, I lined up myself. He attempted to serve me, but instead I reached into the truck and injected him with a tranquilizer. He may have been only a shell of a person, but he was not immune to good old-fashioned medication. I tied him up and hitched his truck to my vehicle. Then I dropped him off at the nearest government facility and waited for my next target.
As I said, that was one of the easier assignments. My next assignment would not be so simple. Its code name was the Rippler. Unlike the ice cream man, the Rippler was still mostly human. He had not lost his emotions or become a mindless zombie. Perhaps that was the problem. Through intense experimentation, the Rippler had gained the ability to create an intense, concentrated earthquake. He had collapsed the facility where he was being stored. The main concern was the danger he posed to everyone around him. If he used his ability in a heavily populated area, countless lives could be lost. This was one of the few cases where I had been advised not to bring the target back alive. Once again, I felt as though the assignment was a test, but it was a different kind of test. The government wanted to see whether I would kill for them without hesitation. It was possible that if I did, there would truly be no escape for me. I was fine with that. I had no intention of leaving. The Rippler was more difficult to find, mainly because he was not trying to attract the attention of everyone around him. But if the government wants you, they will find you. He had relocated to a small town and changed his name, his face, and everything else in an attempt to escape. I almost felt sorry for him. I doubted he had volunteered to be a guinea pig for the government. Now, all he wanted was a normal life. Once I found the town where he was staying, I made sure to keep my distance. I did not want him going nuclear on me. I confirmed that he was my target by collecting DNA samples from his trash. Now, all that was left was to take him down. I did not want to kill him, but I did not have many options. The scientists who had created him were still unsure of the extent of his powers and his ability to control them. If I brought him back alive, there was no telling whether the government even had a facility capable of holding him. I did what I thought was best. After he returned home one night, I put a bullet between the Rippler's eyes. It did not feel good, but I continued convincing myself that it was necessary. I dropped off his body and was thanked for my service. Things would not become easier from there. My next target was codenamed Ghoul. This one was truly a monster. I am not sure what the government had been trying to create in Ghoul, but I do not think they had gotten what they wanted. Ghoul had enhanced strength and speed, but with one slight problem. He ate humans. And who knows, maybe that was exactly what the government wanted. As you can imagine, Ghoul found a way to escape. After a while, you would think those government scientists would become better at containing their experiments. Apparently, that was not the case. This mission might not have been so bad, but I had been given strict orders to bring Ghoul back alive. All my lethal weapons were taken away and replaced with tranquilizers, strong enough to bring down a rhinoceros. I requested a partner for the assignment, but of course, I was swiftly denied. Ghoul had taken up residence in a forest. That might not have been so bad if the forest had not contained an extremely popular hiking trail.
There had always been frequent disappearances in the forest. Many of them had been labeled suicides, but since Ghoul escaped, the number had increased significantly. The government did me a favor and had the trail closed for the weekend, so it would just be Ghoul and me. I would not have to worry about anyone else getting in the way. I had always wanted to go on a hiking date, but this was not quite what I had pictured. I set out into the forest, looking for signs of his nest. I had made sure not to shower all week in preparation. If Ghoul came to me, it would make my job of dragging him back to my vehicle much easier, and I was sure he would eventually become hungry. After about an hour of following markings and footprints that I assumed belonged to Ghoul, I began coming across bones. Human bones. I was getting closer. I followed the path for a few more minutes before I began to hear noises. It looked like my date had arrived. Tree branches shook as he drew nearer. After only a few minutes, he was standing on a large tree directly in front of me. He looked down at me, studying me. He was not very large, perhaps 5 feet 6 inches tall, with an average frame. But appearances can be deceiving. His skin was a sickly yellow, and his hair had begun to recede, as though he were an old man, even though he was clearly much younger. His eyes were pure white. There was nothing else in them. After a brief stare down, he jumped. There was a good 50 feet between us, so I thought I would have a few seconds to prepare myself. I was wrong. Like a video game character, he soared from the trees and landed directly on top of me. I had just enough time to pull out a tranquilizer and shove it into his side. But it was not enough. Despite the strength of the tranquilizer, he seemed relatively unaffected. He shrugged it off and tore a chunk of flesh from my shoulder. I lay helpless as he began chewing on my flesh. I knew it would not be long before he came back for seconds. I struggled to pull out another tranquilizer. I managed to get it free just as he lunged in for another bite. I jammed the second tranquilizer into his neck. I felt his teeth begin to lock onto my neck, but before he could bite down, he passed out. I let out the biggest sigh of relief of my life and pushed him off me. I put on the special restraints I had been given for him, making sure the muzzle was extra tight. I was not sure how long the tranquilizers would last, but hopefully it would be long enough for me to deliver this monster. Despite missing a chunk of my shoulder, I had escaped alive. Ghoul was only one monster created by science. I could only imagine what my future had in store for me. After delivering Ghoul, I informed the higher-ups that I needed at least a month off. Knowing what they had put me through, they agreed. If anything, they were impressed that I had returned mostly in one piece. After my month-long break and recovery, I was given an easier assignment to ease me back into things. Its code name was Romeo. Romeo had been made to be a charmer, and that was exactly what he was. He was a true Adonis in every sense of the word. Romeo made the statue of David look ugly by comparison. From what I could tell, he had probably been designed to charm women and foreign diplomats. Instead, he charmed anyone and everyone. That was how he had charmed his way out of his holding cell. Romeo was not really a danger to anyone, except perhaps himself, if he ever found himself in the hands of an angry spouse. I am sure he could have charmed his way out of that too. Finding Romeo was easy. The hard part would be extracting him. He was always surrounded by a crowd, almost like a cult. If there was a high-class party, Romeo would be there. He never returned to his room with fewer than 10 people following him. I needed a good plan to separate him from his entourage. I decided to attend one of his parties so I could get a better sense of the situation. It was crucial that I find any openings he might have. What I did not expect was for Romeo to approach me. "Good evening, monsieur. I do not believe we have met before. I am Romeo. And you?" "Monsieur?" Was that French? I thought. I almost threw up a little in my mouth. I suppose I should have expected it. He had quite an ego. At least his charm was not working on me. I was not entirely sure why, but I suspected it had something to do with my disgust at how perfect he was. "Oh, I am James. I am kind of new here. It is nice to meet you, Romeo," I replied. James. What a fabulous name. We? But alone at the party? Unacceptable. Come with me. My friends and I are about to return to my estate. I will show you the finer parts of the city. Is that a sexual reference? I wondered. Regardless, this is going much better than expected. I was making direct contact with my target. If I went to his home, perhaps I could wait until everyone else fell asleep and sneak away with Romeo before anyone noticed. I do not know. We just met. I would not want to impose on you like that, I said, trying to play hard to get. No, I insist. You must. Samantha, go with my friend James here and guide him to my home.
I will be there shortly. There is someone I must see first," Romeo replied, motioning to one of the women in his group. Samantha guided me to Romeo's room. I already knew where he lived, of course, but I had to play dumb. Romeo's estate was a true mansion, with aesthetics that made it look as though someone had designed it in the game The Sims. I was escorted inside. The rest of Romeo's entourage arrived shortly afterward. I was offered scotch that had apparently been aged for more than 100 years. I was not much of a drinker, but I accepted it anyway. Romeo arrived almost an hour later, fashionably late to his own party. As soon as he arrived, he approached me. "James, follow me. There is something I must show you." I did not hesitate to follow him. This was my chance to be alone with him. I could tranquilize him and be on my way before anyone noticed. He led me to a room on the other side of the home. The room was something else. It was not what I had expected. The walls were covered with pictures of men and women. Each picture showed a different person. I recognized a few of them from his group. "What is this?" I asked without thinking. "These are all the people I have conquered, and you are next. Please remove your clothing," Romeo said. He turned his back to me and began removing his own clothing. I almost felt compelled to remove mine as well. His words held incredible power, but I managed to resist. Instead, I approached him and sank the tranquilizer into his neck. I duct taped his mouth shut. I had heard enough of his words for one night. Romeo was much larger than me, so dragging him out the window and into the back of my vehicle took considerable effort. Still, I managed to do it before anyone became suspicious. I assume his friends thought he was simply taking his time conquering me. I dropped off Romeo and made sure to shower especially well that night. My experience with Romeo almost made me miss my date with Ghoul. Almost. My next assignment would be another interesting one. Its code name was Kong. What happens when you splice human DNA with gorilla DNA? Apparently, you get Kong. Personally, I would have preferred the name Caesar, in reference to Planet of the Apes. But I did not get to choose the names. Kong was essentially a smaller version of Bigfoot. And before you ask whether Bigfoot exists, I have to say that I do not know. I had not been tasked with hunting him yet. Kong was a kill assignment. There was no guarantee that the tranquilizers would work, and if they did, no one knew how long they would last. He had also killed 2 scientists during his escape, so the government was not concerned about bringing him back alive. They simply wanted to dissect what remained of him. I was given specific instructions to avoid the head if possible. They mainly wanted to examine the brain, and that would not be possible if I splattered it across the ground. Another problem was my experience with long-range weapons. Long-range shooting had been part of my training, of course, but I had only gone through the basics. I had been told that most of my missions would be up close and personal, so it was not considered especially important. It was starting to seem important now. Like Ghoul, Kong had taken up residence in a forested area. However, since his diet did not consist of human meat, he had chosen a much more secluded location.
I did not think Kong wanted to hurt anyone. He could have lived his life in the woods without bothering anybody. But that was not what the government wanted. My superiors told me they had already conducted aerial sweeps of the area and knew exactly where the cave he was staying in was located. Of course, they had done the easy part. I would be doing the dirty work on the ground. I made my way to a vantage point overlooking the cave and set up the sniper rifle they had supplied.
Then, all I had to do was wait. After a few hours, Kong finally appeared. He walked out of the cave and began stretching his limbs, the way most of us do after waking up. I studied the rifle and aimed the crosshairs at the place where I assumed his heart was. Then, I pulled the trigger. I missed. I had not taken into account the wind, which had picked up while I waited. The bullet veered to Kong's right and struck the rock beside the cave. Kong did not move. Instead, he simply turned his gaze toward me. His eyes were all too human. He did not try to escape. He knew I would eventually come for him. And if it was not me, someone else would. Kong had accepted his fate. I had killed the Rippler, of course, but that was different. I had done it while he was asleep. I had not needed to see the look in his eyes before he died. I almost wished Kong had been a monster like Ghoul. That way, I would not have felt so bad about putting him down. With slight hesitation, I reloaded my gun. I took aim again, accounting for the wind this time, and fired. Bullseye. Kong went down instantly. I made my way over to confirm that he was dead. Luckily, he was. He would not have to suffer anymore. Kong weighed far too much for me to drag back alone. Instead, I set off a flare I had been given for this exact purpose and waited for the air team to collect him. Sitting beside Kong's lifeless body made me question my line of work. I had never felt so disgusted with myself, but I knew there was no way out for me. I was already in too deep. Perhaps the government had created another monster in me. Someday, they might have to put me down too. For now, though, I was still doing their dirty work. My next assignment was codenamed Dahlia. Dahlia was a doll. A ventriloquist doll, to be exact. Despite her simple appearance, she was quite dangerous. Probably not in the way most people would expect. She could not move on her own. She could speak, but that was all. She was not going to run around your home in the middle of the night stabbing people. Instead, Dahlia had an incredibly powerful ability to influence others. One look into her eyes, and she could take complete control of you. It was a little ironic, a ventriloquist doll making humans into her puppets. During my briefing, I was told that Dahlia was essentially the definition of a sadist. She enjoyed making her victims inflict as much pain as possible before eventually disposing of them. I am not sure whether demons are real, but if they are, I am sure one of them was trapped inside that doll. Dahlia was believed to be staying with a family of 4. A scientist who had fallen under her control had taken her there. She had been gone for only about a week, but there was no telling what she had done during that time. The scientist who had taken her returned to her workplace the next day and attempted to murder her coworkers, but she was quickly dealt with. I made my way to the family's home, hoping to be surprised by what I found. Let us just say that I got my wish, but not in the way I had hoped. I knocked on the front door. After several minutes without a response, I turned the handle and found that the door was unlocked. I wish it had not been. The moment I stepped inside, I was struck by a putrid smell. I knew immediately what it meant. Death. The walls were coated in blood. Some of it was dried, while some was fresh and still slowly dripping down. I found the family together in the living room. The mother and 2 children were sitting in a small triangle. They were already dead and beginning to rot. Their stomachs had been cut open, with their entrails hanging out. They had been posed to make it look as though they were eating their own organs. In the center of the triangle, the father hung from the ceiling. He had scratches and cuts all over his body, but that was nothing compared to what had happened to his family. Just before I vomited onto the floor, I heard a voice from the opposite corner of the room. "You are just in time. What do you think of my art? It is a little sloppy, but I am sure it will get better with time." Dahlia.
Oh, have you come to get me already? I was having such a wonderful time. Well, I am finished here anyway. I suppose you can take me back for now. I will be out again soon. I made my way toward the voice while keeping my head down. I had no intention of ending up like that family. When I got close, I closed my eyes. I managed to pick Dahlia up, turn her over, and carry her back to my vehicle. Let me sit up front. I like having conversations during car rides. Besides, you cannot get much action from women in this line of work. It will be fun for both of us. As much as I wanted to throw her in the back and cover her with a blanket, I did not want her out of my line of sight. So I granted her request. I carefully placed her in the front seat and turned her head toward the window. I would be lying if I said I was not curious about her. I
wanted to understand what made a monster into a monster. You should just take me home with you.
Tell your boss I was not here. I am sure we could have a lot of fun together. I am sure you would make excellent kindling for a fire. You are funny. I like you. I was thinking about having someone kill you eventually, but maybe I will keep you. Oh, you do not kill everyone? Of course not. I like to let the really bad ones live. It is more fun that way. What do you mean by that? Are you saying I am a bad person? That made me angry.
I almost turned to look at Dahlia, but I thought better of it. Was she simply trying to provoke me? You are not quite on my level yet, but I see potential in you. You did not even scream when you saw my work. Maybe you even enjoyed seeing it. You may think we are different, but we really are not. She was partly right. I had not reacted when I saw the bodies. I had felt sick. But if I had seen something like that a few months earlier, I probably would have passed out.
Whether I liked it or not, I was changing. I did not think it was for the better. "What are you?" I finally asked after several minutes of silence. "Look into my eyes, and I will tell you." "Nice try. I may be stupid, but I am not that stupid," I replied, nearly laughing.
What are you afraid of? Do you think you would see yourself if you looked into my eyes? That is enough. Say one more word, and I will look up where the nearest wood chipper is.
Those were the last words I spoke during our little road trip.
I dropped off Dahlia and informed the staff about the scene at the house. They said they would send someone to clean it up. I hoped they would give me a break after what I had seen. I was not that lucky. As soon as I turned Dahlia in, they told me they already had another assignment ready. Its code name was Jack. Grandiose name, I know. This was probably the strangest assignment I had received.
Jack appeared to be entirely human. I had no idea why I had been tasked with finding him. Perhaps he was a runaway scientist or someone who knew too much. He certainly was not what I had grown used to hunting. I was told that Jack was increasingly dangerous and that I should not take any risks while attempting to capture him alive. In other words, they wanted him dead. That only made me more curious about the secrets Jack must have known. Jack was constantly moving, so he was not easy to find. But my training had paid off, and eventually I tracked him down. I watched him for a while. He did not seem dangerous to me. Suspicious and cautious, yes, but not dangerous. One night, he left his hotel to get food, so I decided to let myself into his room. Jack and I needed to have a talk. Jack did not seem surprised when he returned and found me sitting on the couch. He simply held out his arms. So they did send someone for me, after all. Go ahead
and do what you have to do. I will not fight it. Sit down, Jack. I just want to talk. Jack raised an eyebrow. A curious one, huh? You know what they say about curiosity, right? I rolled my eyes and motioned for him to sit down. Who are you, Jack? And why did they send me after you? You do not know. I am you. Or at least, I used to be. They tell us where to go, who to kill, and who to bring back alive.
And we do it without asking questions. I could not handle it anymore, though. So here I am, and here you are. His words stopped me for a moment. I knew he had some connection with my agency, but I had never considered that he had been in the same position as me. There really was no way out, except death. I walked across the room, pulled out my gun, and killed Jack. I had the answers I came for. Perhaps Dahlia was right. We were not so different after all.
I returned with Jack's body. I was not asked to give my usual debriefing. Instead, I received a simple nod and was told to go home and wait for my next assignment. I wondered whether this had been another test. If it had been, I was sure I had passed with flying colors. I understand if you think less of me for the choices I have made. But if it had not been me, it would have been someone else. This was the life I had chosen. Or perhaps it was the life chosen for me. Regardless, I could not back down now. I was simply one disposable person in the larger scheme of things. Do not mistake my actions for blind loyalty. I know the people I work for are not good people. I simply know my place in this world. The moment I stop being useful, I will end up like Jack. How does the saying go? Better the devil you know than the devil you do not. I am a cog in a giant machine. Once my cog stops working, I will be discarded and replaced by another, just like all of you. Despite risking death every day I wake up, I have never felt more alive. I no longer have nightmares about those I have killed. I have stopped caring about things like that. If I become too soft, I will end up like Jack, and I have no intention of letting that happen. After I disposed of Jack, I was given a week off. It had been a long time since I had any time to myself. It felt strange. I had never had many friends to begin with, and my work had distanced me from the few family members I had kept in contact with. That week off made me realize how empty my life had become. Was that what they wanted? Regardless, I returned to work the minute my week was over, ready for my next assignment. And I received one. Its code name was Mimic. As her name implied, Mimic was a master of disguise. She had the ability to morph her voice into a perfect replica of anyone she chose, but she could not change her body. I imagine she was still a work in progress. Could you imagine what the government could do if it could create a perfect body double of anyone it wanted? Mimic had escaped with several other experiments, but she was a top priority. It was believed that the group had split up, but I was warned to watch for any of them in case they turned up. Because of her ability, Mimic would be extremely difficult to locate. Several hunters like me were assigned to search for her. If our information was correct, she had not yet escaped the city where we lived. But if she had, we might never find her. The only way to identify her was by a distinct scar on her left shoulder. The government established roadblocks at every exit from the city, while our hunters searched within. 3 other hunters and I were each assigned a quadrant. Mimic had no family. She would have to break into a building or find an abandoned place to stay. I spent several hours walking the streets of my quadrant, asking strangers whether they had seen a suspicious-looking woman. I also searched old, decrepit homes that had been empty for years. I found nothing. That was until I was approached by a slender, young-looking man, probably in his early 20s. Are you looking for someone? Yes. It is hard to explain. I am looking for a girl, but I am not entirely sure what she looks like. Aren't we all? But I may be able to help you. I saw a girl run into an old building around the corner. She was acting strangely and kept looking over her shoulder. Maybe she is the person you are looking for. Thank you. I will check it right now, I said, pushing past the man without giving his words a second thought. I quickly made my way to the building and let myself in. To my amazement, Mimic was actually there. I was not sure what I had expected. Mimic was tied to a chair. I knew it was her because the scar was clearly visible. None of the other hunters had contacted me to say they had entered my area or found Mimic. So why was she tied up? That was when I remembered who had told me I would find her there. The stranger. Before I could turn around, I heard his voice. It is a gift. She is quite important to them, is she not? It was the strange young man I had just met. But he was not behind me. He was in front of me, standing near Mimic. How had he gotten there? I had almost sprinted to the building. Who are you? That is not important right now. Are you not going to thank me? Oh, wait. That is not important either. He paused. The real reason I am here is to deliver a message to you. A message from whom? I was truly perplexed. As I had said before, I made contact with almost no one. Do not look so confused, friend. It is from your girlfriend. Have you already forgotten her? Dahlia would be so upset to hear that. I immediately cut him off. Dahlia is a demonic doll I want nothing to do with unless it involves a large fire. The man laughed. She said you would say something like that. Regardless,
She wants you to know that she is coming to pick you up soon, and that she really misses you. Now, if you will excuse me." The man turned and began walking away. "Hey, where do you think you are going?" I pulled out my tranquilizer gun and aimed it at him. He did not respond or stop walking, so I fired. My aim was perfect, or it would have been if the dart had not passed straight through the man, as though he were not there. He continued walking directly toward a wall, and then walked through it. What had just happened? A man had appeared out of nowhere, led me to Mimic, and told me that Dahlia was coming for me.
To make matters worse, there was clearly something unusual about him. He knew Dahlia, and objects passed directly through his body. Was he under her control? I had no idea what was going on, but I still had a job to do, and my target was right in front of me. I informed the other hunters that I had found Mimic and was taking her back. That was exactly what I did. I brought Mimic back to my bosses. I expected some kind of praise, but I knew that was unlikely, despite her value. I was surprised again when I reached the holding facility. The entire place was in lockdown, at least as much as it could be. Half the building had been destroyed. The facility was located outside of town in a secluded area for obvious reasons, so I knew no innocent people had died. However, I saw the corpses of many scientists and guards scattered around the area. I knew some of them had families, but these people were not exactly angels. I managed to find one of my superiors, who briefly explained the situation. While our forces had been spread thin searching for Mimic, a group had attacked the facility. It was obvious they had been looking for a particular experiment, but no one knew which one. Around 20 of the 50 experiments held at the facility had escaped. I asked which experiments had escaped, but I was told that information was confidential. They simply instructed me to leave Mimic with them, go home, and wait while they sorted everything out. But I would be busy again soon enough. Part of me already knew which experiment had escaped. Was Dahlia the target? I thought it was highly possible. I had already been warned that she was coming for me. I had no idea what was about to happen, but it could not be good. Several days had passed since the attack on the facility. I was temporarily sent home while the government dealt with the damage. With half the building destroyed, it would not do much good to start hunting the experiments before we had somewhere to store them. We would find them eventually anyway. I managed to sleep for about 4 hours before my phone rang. It was time to hunt down the escapees. The government called in 3 other hunters who had helped search for Mimic. We were given a short list of the experiments who had escaped. To my dismay, Dahlia was on the list. She could not move on her own, so it was clear that she was with another experiment. Which one, though, I had no idea. I flipped through the pages to see whether the man I had seen with Mimic was on the list, but he was not.
We found about half of the 20 escapees during the first day. Some of the experiments stood out too much, and without anyone to help them on the outside, they were easy targets.
There were still 11 at large, including Dahlia. Every time we found a new lead, I hoped it would be the person carrying Dahlia. Unfortunately, it never was. After conducting a quick sweep of the nearby city without finding anything new, we were all sent home to rest. The government would review security camera footage and contact us if they found anything. They were also calling in reinforcements after the attack and trying to determine who had orchestrated it.
There was no way I was going home with the killer doll stalking me. Instead, I made sure I was not being followed. I parked my car on a random street and found a small motel. It was a shabby, run-down place, but strangely, that made me feel safer. I slept with my lethal gun in my hand and my tranquilizer gun nearby. I knew I would not be able to sleep much, but it would be even worse if Dahlia came for me while I was too exhausted to fight back. The night passed without incident.
I was called in early the next morning. It turned out that 2 experiments had been spotted together. They had stolen a car and were on their way out of the city. The people at the facility would slow them down as much as possible using stoplights. Another hunter and I were ordered to follow them. They might lead us to more of the escapees. I quickly met up with one of the hunters from before. He was probably in his mid-30s, so he had likely been doing this much longer than I had. Luckily, we spotted the stolen vehicle just before it left town. Despite knowing the vehicle had been slowed down, the situation seemed too easy. The car began taking back roads and eventually pulled into an old cabin. Although we were the only vehicle following it for most of the journey, the car showed no unusual behavior to suggest that its occupants knew we were behind them.
The other hunter pulled over a short distance from the cabin and began preparing himself. I pulled out my phone.
"This is obviously a trap," I said. "Maybe I can call for backup." The other hunter stopped me. "Listen, kid, I have been doing this a long time. I know this is probably a trap, but do you really think they are going to send anyone to help us? We are on our own. You can either help me or sit out here and wait. I am going in." "Well then."
"After you, I suppose," I replied coldly. I knew he was probably right. The government did not care much about us. They would probably scold me and ask what I had been waiting for. So, I began preparing as well. Death might have been preferable to whatever Dahlia wanted to do with me. The other hunter and I exited the vehicle and moved toward the cabin as quietly as possible in broad daylight. When we reached the door, the hunter counted down from 3 and threw some kind of grenade through the front window. It exploded into gas and quickly filled the home. I could not help wondering why I had never been given access to those grenades before. Once most of the gas had dispersed, we covered our noses with our shirts and went inside. We immediately found one of the experiments unconscious on the floor. If I remembered correctly, her code name was Trauma. By touching someone, she could force them to see their worst nightmares. I suppose that since waterboarding was considered too humane, using a human nightmare machine was the preferred solution. The other hunter began moving toward her. He started restraining her while I watched his back. He was almost finished when everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I saw the other hunter tied to a chair in front of me. He was still unconscious.
I looked down and saw that I was in the same situation. I was firmly tied to a chair. "Ah, you are finally awake," a male voice said beside me. I turned to look. It was the man from before, the one who had walked through the wall. He was sitting in a chair, but he was not tied up. I doubted any kind of binding could hold him anyway. A doll sat on his lap. The doll wore a hood pulled up just enough to cover its eyes. The man spoke again. "It is actually a little funny. The last time we met, I gave you someone tied up in a chair. Now you are the one tied up." "What do you want?" I asked. I was not in the mood for games, although I did not have much choice. "I told you, Dahlia here was coming to pick you up. Instead, you came to see her for yourself. How sweet of you. Did you really miss me that much? Can you just kill me already? Do whatever you're going to do?" "I told you, I let the bad ones live. And you have been quite bad recently, killing that poor man, Jack. It was a little quick, but I am sure you still enjoyed it." I did what I was told. He knew what he had signed up for. Yes, he did. The rest of us were not so fortunate. The government turned all our lives into games. The only difference between us is that you had a choice. The rest of the experiments and I never had the luxury of knowing what we were getting into. So what? Do you want to overthrow the government? Expose them or something? Dahlia began to laugh. Heavens, no. They are far too powerful for that. And there are too few of us to even consider challenging them. I simply do not care enough about something like that. No, I simply wanted you. What do you want from me? I may have done terrible things, but I am still nothing like you. Maybe not yet. She paused. But you will be, soon enough. After she finished speaking, 2 new people entered the room. Both wore lab coats. One held a syringe. When he reached me, he pushed it into my arm and released the fluid. Once again, the world went black. I woke to find myself looking at 2 bodies. One was the other hunter. The other was mine. Both had bullet holes in their heads. How was this possible? Was I dead? If so, how was I still seeing everything? I quickly looked down at myself, fearing the worst. I was not trapped inside a doll.
I still appeared to be human. I touched my face and the rest of my body.
I still felt solid, and I could still pick things up. But why did my body appear to be dead on the floor? "It is incredible, is it not?" the man said. "It looks exactly like you, even down to the fingerprints. It is one of the experiment's abilities. The other body is not a replica, though. He is quite dead. And you killed him with your gun, by the way." "What did you do to me?" I asked. I knew they had to have done something. The man simply shrugged. "Nothing." "It seems your body rejected the serum they had planned for you." Rejected? At least that was one thing to be happy about. I was still trapped in a room with one of my captors, a dead body, and a replica of my own dead body. "What happens now?" I asked, even though I was not sure I would receive a direct answer. "Since the serum did not work, Dahlia has one last plan for you." As he spoke, the door opened again. Trauma brought Dahlia back into the room, this time without her hood. I was no longer tied up, but I knew there was still no way for me to escape. So I stood still as Trauma approached with Dahlia in her hands. When Trauma stood directly in front of me, I crouched down and looked straight into Dahlia's eyes. I would not fight fate. What I saw in those eyes was pure evil. I saw countless wars, murders, deaths, and suicides. The tragedy seemed endless. But I did not lose control of myself. Instead, I quickly reached for the lighter I had hidden in my shoe ever since I learned that Dahlia had escaped. I flicked it almost instantly and held it against Dahlia's dress. She burst into flames. There was no stopping the fire. Trauma and the strange man desperately tried to extinguish it, but it was as though Dahlia had been soaked in gasoline. I took a moment to smile before sprinting out the door. I saw several people on my way out of the house, but none of them seemed concerned with me. They were all trying to reach the room where Dahlia was burning. I knew the entire cabin would soon be engulfed, so I only needed to get outside. Once I made it out, I ran to where the hunter's car had been parked. Surprisingly, it was still there. They had not moved it, but the hunter still had the keys. I smashed the window, hot-wired the car as quickly as possible, and sped away. By the time I drove off, the fire in the cabin was enormous. Part of me hoped everyone inside would die, but they had all been under Dahlia's control. It was possible that some of them were good people. I let the thought die as I continued moving forward. I have been hiding ever since that day. I know that recording this puts me in even more danger, but this story needed to be told. It is almost guaranteed that the government will hear this. Perhaps they will send someone after me, but I do not care anymore. I will not be anyone's puppet, not the government's, and not a psychotic doll's. I am officially done hunting down the government's mistakes.